So today, for education, we have the awesome Ashley Brown joining us once again. Ashley has been in the industry for just under 2 decades and has spent her career educating on how to properly love and care for guests and textures of all types. With a focus on medium to highly textured hair, curls, coils, and waves. She is a salon owner, she is a mentor, she is a Zambia ambassador, she is a Mizani artist, so she's busy. And she has also cultivated a multicultural team at her salon and clientele, giving her the tools to access and continue the mission of diversity and inclusivity throughout the industry. So please welcome in the chat the awesome Ashley Brown.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that amazing welcome. It's always such a pleasure to be on Mannequin Mondays. So we're going to get into some silk press. Last time I was on here, we talked about silk pressing for beginners. This time we're going to talk about something more advanced. So silk pressing for the more advanced stylist, as well as how do you preserve your silk press. Everybody drop in the chat preserve. I'm just going to refresh my chat so I can make sure I can see all you lovely people. Drop the word preserve, drop where you're tuning in from so we can get right into it. All right, so I have my Janet mannequin prepped. I just want to point out, this is the beautiful pivot point Janet mannequin. So I'm just going to use my continuous sprayer to re-wet her, because one thing that's super important when you're doing a silk press, when you're prepping the hair, you want to make sure it's fully saturated with water. Everybody put saturation in the chat box. So the Janet Pivot Point mannequin, I want to just start out by saying Pivot Point is probably, I'm not going to say probably, it is the most amazing brand when it comes to getting your mannequins. So if you're a professional stylist behind the chair, you're a student in school, and you're looking to get as much practice as possible on mannequins, on different texture types, different color services, different styling services, Pivot Point's the way to go. I mean, without a doubt, their mannequins are ethically sourced as far as the hair that they use to create the mannequins, which is so important. And they have such a wide variety of different textures. So we're just getting her nice and saturated. I have her prepped because again, I really want to focus today on how do you preserve your silk press and how do you educate your guests on what they can do at home for their silk press to keep their hair as healthy as possible. All right, I see a lot of people dropping saturation. Wonderful. So I'll zoom her in here so you can see she's really, really nice and saturated. So this is Janet before. This is how she comes. So you see this nice, beautiful texture on the Mizani texture key. She's closer to a texture type 5. So she's going to be curly to very curly. Not quite coily, but curly to very coily. And then, or to very curly. And then you can see when she's wet, she still has that nice texture in there. So essentially, we're just going to pretend that this section of Janet we have prepped with our Mizani Gentle Clarifying Shampoo. So this is going to gently remove any buildup that Janet has on her strand. That's super important for prepping a silk press. Then we went in right ahead with the Press Agent Shampoo and Conditioner from Mizani. So this is going to immediately begin to smooth and soften the cuticle, which is so important if you want to have a successful silk press. Now I'm using the Mizani 25 Miracle Milk. I'm just going to shake it up a little bit and then just spray a little bit in my hands, emulsify, and I'm just pulling it through mid shaft to ends. All right. So again, we're just going to work on one quadrant of Janet's head just so that we can really get a nice refresh on how to professionally provide that silk press service, and then get into how does your client preserve it at home. All right. So once we have that parted, we are just going to take our dry sectioning clips, and we're just going to section this in half, because this is too large of a section on its own to really be able to control. And we want to make sure with the silk press, we're prepping it. We want to have maximum control. Everybody drop max control in the chat box. All right, so we have this separated top to bottom. Now I'm just going to take, and I'm using my Zambia 9-row brush here. I'm just going to take, and I'm going to smooth this hair that we're not going to be blow drying first. And I'm going to band 2-knot it. Everybody put band 2-knot in the chat box. So band 2-knotting is a really great way to make sure that all that saturation that you just put in the hair, that we can preserve it. Okay, so band 2-knot. Go ahead and drop that in the chat. So I'm band 2-knotting the piece of hair that we're not working on so it can stay nice and saturated, using my dry sectioning clip and just clipping that out of the way. And you might say, Ashley, it's called the dry sectioning clip. Janet's hair is wet. What's the deal? You can definitely use it on wet hair as well. All right, so we have our first section, and you can see like the width and the density of this first section that we're going to be working on. It's fully saturated, and now I'm going to apply my Press Agent Raincoat Styling Serum and Cream, okay? So the cream is going to give you more moisture. The serum is going to give you some hold. One thing that's important with the silk press is it has to be prepped properly so you don't deal with the hair reverting. We definitely don't want any reverting. So for this size section, and based on the density and porosity of Janet's hair, I'm going to use about a pea-size amount of the cream and a half a pea of the serum, emulsifying in my hands so it's evenly distributed, and then I'm starting at my ends and working my way up, applying the product. So the porosity is really key because if the hair is really porous, you have to make sure that as you're moving throughout the head, that you are using your continuous spray bottle to make sure that hair is staying saturated before you get in and start drying. Because if Janet has some frizz because she's very porous, and I don't make sure it's saturated before I start drying, what's going to happen is her cuticle is going to want to stay open. I'm not going to be able to seal it closed, okay? All right, let's see here. Can we get a list of products used? Absolutely. So stay tuned because we always do a recap. That's one thing I love to do at the end of the session is do a recap. We'll list out the products as well. So thank you for that question. All right, so I'm just untangling my cord here. So I'm going to get into it with my Pro-Ionic dryer. As Andrew said in the beginning, these are on sale. I also do have an ambassador code that's ASHB10, B as in boy. So ASHB10, you can also use that discount along with the current sale. So if now's a good time to buy it. And I have the new Sea Smoke color, which I love. So we're going to get into it with our Pro-Ionic dryer and our thin nozzle. So this dryer actually comes with two different size nozzles. So you can see one is much thinner than the other. Because we really want to get in there really tight with the blow dry, we want to use the thinner nozzle for tension, okay? Because we're going to go in and start drying and we want to get some really good tension. What I'm going to do first, because we have, one second, because we have this prepped, I'm just going to move this out of the way so that I don't accidentally start detangling and drying that. All right, so we have our section. I'm going to go on the highest heat setting. So my heat is highest heat setting and then highest airflow. All right, and I'm going to come in with my sand via paddle brush, and I'm actually going to lock that hair in. Okay, so I'll do that one more time. Just tighten up my mannequin stand because I can already feel her falling here. So I'm just coming from underneath and I'm literally locking that hair in because what I want to do is I want to start to get this root dry first. She's nice and detangled. So I'm just going to go through highest heat setting and I'm almost rocking it towards and away, towards and away. So you can see if I start to lose tension, I'm going to go ahead and anchor that brush right back in there and get my tension back. Because tension and heat must meet. Go ahead and drop that in the chat. Tension and heat must meet. So I'm starting to come down the shaft of the hair. So I really want to make sure I get that root nice and smooth before I really start going down the shaft of the hair. So essentially I'm working in 3 different zones. I have zone 1, which is my root area, zone 2, which is my mid shaft, and zone 3, which is my ends. So when I pull my tension in here, I'm really making sure I'm rocking my dryer with the nozzle pointing downwards to really get that nice tension as I'm smoothing out the hair. Coming back in, locking that in, and pulling it right down. Locking it in. And pulling it right down. So now I'm just going to release this so you can see what's happening. So now, take her from here. You can see that root is starting to get nice and smooth. I haven't even really started to get through the mid shaft to ends yet, but you can see that root is smoothing out. So now that I've smoothed out the root, I am going to start pulling through the ends. but I'm going to lock that in so I get that tension. So I'm locking it in first. Highest heat setting, highest airflow. And I'm just rocking my dryer down that strand. Rocking it all the way down. And now I'm starting to get into my zone 2 and moving towards my zone 3, which is the end. Still have really good tension. Really nice tension to really feel the cuticle as I'm drying the hair. All right. So now I'm really in my zone 3 and same thing. Good tension, and I'm rocking my dryer so that I can release and reapply that heat. All right. So let's take a look at our first section on Janet that we've dried. So you can see she already has really nice shine to the hair, and she's already got some body in there, because one thing about a silk press, not all silk presses are created equal. And as a professional, I've been doing hair 20 years. My clients love when their silk press has a lot of bounce and movement and body to it. They definitely want it to be smooth and silky, the cuticle really laid down, but nobody likes it really when the hair is just so silk pressed and so weighed down that it's just like so close to the head. You know, right now when you look on TV, movies, Instagram, Pinterest, you're seeing a lot of fullness, a lot of volume in hair. And so we want to really continue that on with the silk press as well. So we can see nice and smoothed out. I can feel her ends are still a teeny bit damp. So I am going to go through and just make sure they're completely dry. That's something that's so important. Before we go through with our flat iron, we have to make sure the hair is 100% dry. Okay. If the hair isn't 100% dry, we're going to deal with the cuticle reverting. So we're just going through again, getting my tension in place. And I'm just coming straight down, maintaining that tension, so I can really get those ends dry. Another way to hold the brush is by standing right in front of your section, and I can scoop my brush underneath. So I'm scooping it underneath for that tension and coming down this way, okay? So just know that you can hold it a little differently. I'm holding it this way, so it's easier for you to see. But if this is more comfortable to stand right in front of your section and be able to really control how you're coming down with that dryer. This is a good angle so you can see how I'm just kind of creating a small circle as I'm coming down to keep that cuticle nice and smooth. All right, so now she's nice and dry. Cuticle nice and smooth. Now we can move on to the next section. So I want to point out, we're only working in one quadrant of Janet's head, but if we were working on the whole head, you want to make sure that you are sectioning and bantu knotting the head so that you have control. Everybody drop control in the chat box. Control is really important because let's say you are trying to work in this whole section as you're blow drying Janet. This might be too much hair to work with. So don't be afraid to section it and part it off so you have more control as you're working. Your outcome will be better. Some people think, you know what, Ashley, I'm going to take larger sections because I'm in a hurry. I need to move faster. I'm going to take a bigger section. Oftentimes when you do that, you end up doing more work to get the hair smooth. The smaller the section you take, the easier it's going to be to control it. All right, so we have our next bantu knot that we just dropped down. You can see the root is starting to get a little bit dry. And as I said, saturation is key. So I need to go back in with my continuous spray bottle and just mist that root a little bit to make sure that she is fully saturated. All right. So I already have my 25 Miracle Milk on there when I detangled. Now I'm going through with my Press Agent Raincoat Styling Serum and Cream. So these two products are specifically made to be cocktailed together. Everybody type cocktail in the chat box. Might not be cocktail hour, but we are cocktailing some products together to get a very successful silk press on Janet. All right. So starting at my ends as I apply, working my way up, using my Sanvia 9-row Denman, my Sanvia 9-row brush to just really detangle and evenly distribute that product. Once it's in there, I can start going in with my Pro Ionic dryer and my paddle brush And keep in mind too, I'm using a paddle brush because I like that it has a wider surface. So it's easy for me to control the hair and dry more of that surface area at once. I definitely could go in with my Sambia 9 row. So I'll show you how that looks just so you can see the difference and the control I have on the hair. All right. So again, I have to make sure I anchor this hair from underneath to get good tension. And I'm starting with my circles, making sure that my nozzle is pointing downwards so the cuticle can really start to get laid down there. All right. So I'm creating my circles, coming through with maximum tension. Creating my circles, maximum tension, because we're first going to get that zone 1 dry. I'm going to put zone 1 in the chat box. So you can see with the Deadman, I can still get really nice tension and control. I'm sorry, with my 9 row. Really nice tension and control. I'm just going to release this just to zoom in. So I still have really nice tension and control here, but it's a smaller surface area. So as I'm getting my zone 1 dry with my 9 row, I'm getting it dry here. Whereas when I was using my Sambia paddle brush, I kind of was able to get more of it dry at once. So let me just grab my paddle brush again. All right. And I'm going to switch to that just so you can again see the difference. And as well, it is a little bit easier because it's a wider surface area for me to go in and get tension with the paddle brush versus the 9 row. You can see how much more hair I'm able to cover in a shorter period of time. All right, so we're going in, maximum tension, straight down, creating my circles. And again, just to show you a different angle, you know, if you're working on a guest behind the chair, it is easier to come from underneath and then create your tension that way and your circles that way. Okay, so that can be easier to stand right in front of your parting and come from underneath. Once I really start to get my zone 1 dry, that's when I move into my zone 2. So zone 1 is right at the root here, getting that nice and dry with full tension, and then coming down into my zone 2. So zone 1, zone 2. Once I get my zone 2 dry, then I'm going to start with my zone 3. Now, something to point out, not all texture types are going to be really easy to detangle and stay detangled on the ends, okay? So if that is the case, you're going to switch it up. You are going to dry the ends first if you have a client who's extra tangly. Sometimes we have guests who come in and they have curls, coils, and waves. They haven't had a haircut for a long time, and so their ends are tangly and we need to get them smooth before we can trim it. So in that situation, what you would do, you still would have maximum tension on your section and just go in and you would dry your zone 3 first. Okay, so if your guest has really stressed out ends, really tangly, you would go through and dry your zone 3 first. Okay, so you get that nice and dry. All right, so that then when you start going in your zone 1 and your zone 2, you're not raking the hair. Because one thing about texture, and when I say texture, I'm referring to curls, coils, and waves. One thing about texture to keep in mind is that it is the most fragile when wet. And so if you are raking through the hair as it's transitioning from wet to dry, you can cause mechanical damage. And let's see here. Caesar has a question. Do you recommend 1-inch or 2-inch partings? Fantastic question. So Caesar, the main thing is making sure that you zone or section that hair off so you have control. The size of the parting is going to be dependent on density. Everybody put density in the chat box. Density matters because let's think about it. If you have somebody with really, really thick density, a 1-inch parting or a 2-inch parting might be way too big, okay? So you just have to keep that in mind. Density matters. Consistency of the hair matters as well. If you have a guest who has really, really coarse hair, you may need to take smaller sections so that you have maximum control. Okay? So density matters, consistency matters, And then also as we're drying, tension matters. And I'm just going to adjust my tripod because I'm using lots of tension. And so that's why I'm pulling it down. That's one thing that when you are blow drying mannequins, you will find is that sometimes when you're using maximum tension, then your tripod will start to kind of fall all over the place. But at least that is a sign that you're using the right amount of tension. All right. So we're going to go back in here. And make sure now we're in zone 2. Maximum tension in our zone 2. Max tension. All right. And my nozzle is pointing down. For those of you who just joined, we are doing a silk press. Again, when we talked about silk press, we know that preparation is key. Okay, the way that you prep the hair is going to make or break the success of your silk press. All right, if it's not prepped properly, you will not get longevity out of that press. That's just how it goes. So I'm anchoring from underneath, making sure I have maximum tension. You can see the tripod is moving. Janet's moving back and forth because I have that really nice tension to get that hair nice and smooth. And almost reminds me of beauty school when I started learning how to do round brush blow dries, round brush blowouts that, you know, as you're doing your round brush, you start to pull the mannequin off of your stand because you're getting really good tension to get that nice smooth blowout. All right, so we can see getting nice and smooth. Looks like the ends are looking like, ouch, a little raggedy, right? So we want to make sure that we go over them to really smooth the cuticle on the ends, okay? So I'm just going to grab my paddle brush again. Sometimes you may end up adding additional product as well to the ends to add more moisture, okay? So I'm just full tension. Just using my finger to secure Janet on that tripod. And just really taking my time to come in and smooth those ends out. And you see how I'm really taking my time to go slowly down that cuticle. I'm not just going through really fast because then I don't have control. I need to really take my time and get that nice and smooth. All right. So let's see here. Make sure these ends are nice and smooth. It looks like they need just a teeny bit more heat. And what I'm going to do is actually just apply a little bit more product. So we have a couple options for this. We want to get these a little smoother because we know preparation is key. So I have a couple options. I can either go through and apply a little bit more of the Raincoat serum. Okay, so either the Raincoat serum or I can take a little bit of the ThermaSmooth Shine Extend and just mist a little bit of that on. That's what I'm going to do because the serum has a little bit of hold to it and Janet needs a little bit of moisture on her ends. So I'm just going to mist that on because this is just a little bit more moisturizing. Take my paddle brush and just evenly distribute that product. And then I'm going to go through and get those ends again with the heat. All right. Oh, let me see here. There we go. All right. So again, maximum tension. Just coming through those ends to really get them nice and smooth before I even go through with my iron. And some people might say, you know what? I know I can get those ends smooth with my iron. Why do I have to go through and do it with the dryer again? Why is that necessary? Well, I'll tell you why. Because again, if we prep this hair and get it really nice and smooth, then we know that her silk press is going to be silkier, smoother, and last longer. All right, I got Janet bobbling around here because of my tension. I think next time I'll put some little sandbags on the bottom of my tripod to make sure as I'm drying, Janet doesn't bobble around. All right. So we can see now just with adding that little bit of product, how much of a difference that makes in the preparation of Janet's ends. Okay. So yes, the cuticle is still a little bit open. Yes, they're still a little bit dry because her hair is longer. So it's a little more porous at the ends, but I hope that you see the difference and how much more together her ends look now versus how they looked when we were just finished doing our first pass through with that tension and that heat. All right. So next up, we are going to go through with our Sea Smoke flat iron we have here. So again, I'm using the Sea Smoke dryer and iron. These dryers and irons Amazing. One thing I love about them, the cord swivels everywhere. If you're a pro behind the chair, this is something that you will definitely appreciate because it allows you to move and get in wherever you need to and keep your wrist protected. Okay. Another thing I love about this flat iron is the size of it. When you are starting out in the industry, so if you're new to the industry, put new, if you've only been doing hair a couple of years or less. If you've been in the industry for a while, put been in for a while, just so I kind of know where everybody's at. But one thing I want to point out is that, let me see, Darlene said, no sandbags, but suction cups. Oh, I love that. Thank you, Darlene. I'm going to try that. I'll have to look and see if I can order some online. One thing I love about this iron is the size because, again, it protects your wrist and your hands. So when you first start working with a flat iron and long term, I mean, this is something I've been doing 20 years. I always suggest to almost grab the iron as though you're grabbing hold of like a handle or like the handle of a pot. Like if you're cooking up, and you're grabbing the handle of a pot, that's how you want to grab the handle of your iron. So if this is my pot handle, I'm just going to come in and grab it. So this way I can easily go in and use the whole strength of my hands to do my silk press. Sometimes I'll see new stylists use and just pinch in here, but this is going to be weaker than using all of this. Okay. So by using your hands and keeping your thumb flat, you have full control. The size of the iron allows you to do that. So that's why size matters with the iron. Okay. All right. So Sambia sleeker iron, that's what we're getting into next. And I am still having issues with my tripod staying up. So I do apologize. I'm just going to tilt this down so you can see. All right. Going back in with my dry sectioning clips again. And I'm actually, so I added a little bit of the Thermosmooth Shine Extend before I went in and did my last pass of my dryer. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the Press Agent Serum. Okay. So just literally you can see like a pea-size amount, a half a pea-size amount of the Raincoat Styling Serum. Emulsify in my hands. I want even emulsification so I can evenly distribute and make sure to work that product in just so that I get more control as I'm flat ironing. I'll use my 9-row Sambia brush to evenly distribute the product. And I'm going to go through with my dry sectioning clip and I'm just going to part it vertically. All right. Because I want to show you the difference in how you part it, why that matters. Just grabbing my tail comb. All right. So using my Sambia tail comb, important to have these fine teeth. Now, if I was working on hair that was very tangly, let's say, we talked about that guest who maybe hasn't had a haircut for a while, what I might grab is actually my Sambia wide and fine tooth comb, because that would then allow me to take and detangle the ends as I work my way up the hair shaft, okay? And then go in with my fine teeth to give me tension. But because Janet is actually in pretty good health here as far as how tangly she is, we can get away with using the tail comb. All right, so we have our vertical section, all right, so straight across. And if you want to have maximum sleek smoothness, a vertical section is best, okay? So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do it from this side so you can all see better. All right. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a root tap a couple times at her root first, just to get that smooth. Everybody drop root tap in the chat box. The root tap will start to get the root smooth before I pull it through my zone 2 and 3. So I'm going through and doing my root tap, then I'm pulling it through, gently releasing about midway through, and then I'm putting my iron back in for my comb chase. All right, pull this out so we can see a little better. So same thing for the next section. I'm dropping my section down, using the tip of my clip to literally just take my next vertical section, clipping this out of the way, going through and do my root tap. Got to get my root tap in, pulling it halfway through, releasing so I can drop my comb in, and then my iron is pushing my comb. I release at the ends because the ends need friends. So as you get further down the shaft, especially on medium to longer hair, you will find that the ends are skinnier than the root area. Because of that, I don't want to beat those ends up with heat. I really want to make sure I'm letting off the heat when I get to the ends, and I'll show you how we finish that, okay? So again, vertical section, going in with my root tap, and you will see my iron literally mirrors my section. So I'm root tapping, coming through, dropping my comb in, my iron is coming back in, doing my comb chase, and then I'm releasing as I get close to the ends. So I'm getting nice, smooth, silky, shiny hair, okay? So we'll continue on. Now, another thing that is amazing about this iron is the way that these ceramic plates are set up. So I'm going to zoom in on this iron so you can see. So if you notice, there's a little edge here on that ceramic plate. So what that means for Janet is when I get close to her root, as I tap her root, I'm not going to burn her, cause any irritation, cause any, sensitivity there because I have this edge here. So that is also hugely important. So I can go in and do my root tap and get close, and she might feel a little warmth, but she's not going to feel any irritation. So that is really key when you're working with your clients. Sometimes you might have a guest that comes in who has had some negative experiences with their silk press services and is going to be really shy and nervous about that heat getting close to their scalp. They might be like, you know what? My mom's been doing my hair for years. Every time she does it, she burns my scalp. 2 ways that the scalp gets burned during a silk press. Way number 1 is if you don't have that ledge there. We have the ledge, so we can literally show her on her hand, like, do you feel that? I'm not going to cause you any irritation there because you can feel that as I bump at your root, you're not going to feel anything. Another way is making sure that the hair is completely dry. So like we talked about, preparation is key. The hair has to be 100% dry before you put the iron on the hair. Okay? Because what happens is if the hair is not 100% dry, you end up getting steam that is created from the heat of the iron. And the steam is what actually ultimately can cause irritation and sensitivity to the scalp. Okay? So we're continuing on with our vertical sections, making sure to do mid shaft to ends, letting go at the ends, and doing our comb chase on that second pass. All right, so we're all the way up the head shape here. We'll turn her to give another angle. All right, perfect. So just so you can see another angle of how close we were getting to the scalp. Also, one thing to note is the size of my sections. Okay, so I have the length of the plate right here. My section is about this long, width-wise, because I want to make sure that I'm not going wider than my plate. If I go wider than my plate, I'm not going to get consistent heat all over. All right, so this iron we have, it is a ceramic iron. It is coated with tourmaline, which really gives you a nice, silky, smooth, even heat on that strand. So ceramic with the coated tourmaline is super important to keep the hair as healthy as possible. All right, as I get to the top here, tilt this so we can see if my tripod behaves here. All right, so tilt that so you can see the top, zoom in. So now here, my section is wider, so I'm going to subsection because again, I want to make sure that the section is small enough that I have control. One other thing I want to point out is that you can see through my section. So you can easily see my fingers through that. Your section should be newspaper thin, okay? Density definitely plays a role in how thick or thin your section is. So does the consistency of the hair. So just really make sure that you're taking a thin enough section so that you have control as you're smoothing that hair out. All right, so we're just coming through and just finishing the fringe here. Still getting nice and close. Making sure that to get all those little hairs. Right at the root, putting my comb in for my comb chase. All right. So once we have finished smoothing Janet's whole head, okay, so we flat iron the whole head, then we are going to go through and bump the ends. So here is where you're going to personalize it. So when it comes to finishing your silk press, you have a couple options. You can definitely go through and give it just like a really smooth silk finish, or you can bump the ends under, you can slightly flip them out, or you can curl it. So we're going to show you how it looks if you give her a really silky smooth finish, and then we're going to show you how it looks if you curl it. Okay. So with Janet, we can see that her ends are still looking a little frizzy, and that is by design. Because as I said, we went through and we did the root twice, pulled it through the mid shaft, did our comb chase, and then we released at the ends because ends need friends. Now they have friends. So when we do our final pass, everybody put final pass in the chat box. We are going to take a bigger subsection. Okay, so we have a much larger subsection, and now we're going to go through and get those ends. Sticking the comb in to do a comb chase again, and really making sure that my iron is pushing my comb. Okay. Next subsection, same thing. You can see about the width and the size of my subsection here. All right, her ends start right about here. You can see where it's a little frizzier right there. So that's what we're going to start with the iron, and really making sure to come through with that tension and the heat to make sure you're sealing that cuticle closed. So we're sealing it nice and closed. Last subsection, same thing, sealing those ends. All right. And if need be, depending on the porosity, you may have to add a little bit more product before you seal the ends. We might go through and add a little bit more of that ThermoSmooth Shine Extend, just misting it on the ends just to give us a little bit more slip, just depending on, the porosity of Janet's hair. All right, so we can see, so now it's much more sleek and smooth. Okay, so that is one option for how you can finish your silk press. So we have some nice shine in there, nice sleekness, nice smoothness. We could even finish it off with a little bit of a hair dressing if we wanted to add even more shine once we're finished. All right. So as far as hair dressing, the Mizani coconut souffle is great for that because it'll, again, just help to keep those ends smooth and sealed. But we're actually going to add some curls in here because one thing we want to talk about today is how do we preserve our silk press? How do our clients preserve it at home? So I'm just going to release this comb, and we are going to take larger, slightly diagonal forward sections, and we're going to come in and curl that hair. So I'm just literally twisting my iron. And I always think about curling the hair with a flat iron, very similar to creating a ribbon, right? When you have a piece of ribbon and you're creating like a curl in that ribbon, you really want to make sure that you have that tension as you're pulling down on the iron. I'm holding Janet's head down because with that tension, I don't want her head to pop off the tripod. Okay. So next section, diagonal forward. Same thing. And again, your sections are going to be based on density. Okay, so if I'm working with somebody who's got fine hair, I might take that whole section I just parted and curl it. Janet's got medium density, so I need to subsection this so I have control. So we've talked a little bit about porosity, which porosity is the hair's ability to retain moisture. Okay, so if the hair is high porosity, that means the cuticle is open, the floodgates are open, and it's going to dry really fast. You might ask, Ashley, how can I easily tell if my client has porous hair? So one really, really easy dead ringer for if your guest has porous hair is after you shampoo them, if they are starting to be dry and frizzy by the time they get back to your chair, so let's say you shampoo them, you give them a deep conditioning treatment, whatever it may be, they head back to your chair, and by the time you get there, you're like, sheesh, my guest is like 50, 60% dry already. So that is one sign that your guest has high porosity, okay? The client that has low porosity, that is going to be the guest that you feel like you're blow drying for days, okay? You literally feel like no matter how I get in there with that heat. I am just drying and drying and drying. And Janet is taking forever to dry. That means that she's got low porosity. Okay. So that is one way to easily figure out if the hair is porous or not. So we talked about porosity matters when it comes to what products you're going to choose and how you're approaching your silk press. It matters because you have to make sure that you keep full saturation of that hair as you are going through and doing your silk press. So if you know your guest is porous, you better have your continuous spray bottle ready and at hand because you're going to be continuously wetting down the hair as you're drying it. If that hair starts to dry before you do that, you're going to be frizzy, you're going to have reverting. It's inevitable. Okay. All right. So we're just going through and finger detangling so I can make sure we balance out her style here. All right. The other thing that we said matters is consistency. Everybody drop consistency in the chat box. So I want to know, does anybody know what consistency is? So consistency isn't necessarily something that we talk about a ton in like beauty school or in the hair industry, but it's something that we talk a lot about on the Mizani team because we know with textured hair, so curls, coils, and waves, consistency definitely matters. Like it's hugely important to make sure you're factoring in the consistency. All right, so I see everybody dropping in consistency. Awesome, I love that. And yes, Lorraine, it's not just the technique, it's the products. Absolutely. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you have the right technique, the right products, and the right tools, that is 75% of the work. Literally, if you are using the right pro products, the right pro tools, and you have the right technique, that is 75% of the silk press. The other 25% is you actually just going through the motions and following the proper technique. All right, so I see everybody drop in consistency. So nobody's dropped in the definition, so I'll tell you what it is, okay? So consistency is essentially how rough or smooth the cuticle feels, okay? So one way you can tell consistency is literally by taking a strand of your client's hair and running your fingers down. You want to think about, does it feel coarse? If the consistency is coarse, it's going to remind you more of like a burlap sack, okay? So if it's coarse, you're thinking like wool or burlap. If it is fine, if it's a fine or soft consistency, think silk. So that matters because that is going to determine what temperature heat setting you are using on your sleeker iron. Okay. So we have 3 different heat settings. We have low, color treated, and high. The low heat setting is going to be 375. So if you're really silky smooth, your guest has silky smooth hair naturally, you're going to want to use low. Okay. The medium heat setting is typically going to be for color treated hair. That's going to be 392. So if your guest has more of like, okay, it's not silk, it's not wool, it's more like denim, that's going to be more of the 392 heat setting. And then last but not least, we have our high heat setting, which is 410. Now you may have noticed Janet is color treated, but I did use the high heat setting because she has a coarser consistency. Okay. All right. So we have Janet's beautiful finished waves. Okay. So we can literally let her leave the salon like this. This is how she's leaving. Or like I said, there's options. We could also just do a smoother silk press with a little bit of volume to give Janet a different look there. Okay. So there's our 2 options. Now let's talk about, how does Janet preserve her hair? So ask me how in the chat box. So Janet gets home. She's like, I'm loving my look. I'm gonna make my man take me out to eat because I feel so beautiful. She goes out to eat. The next day, she goes to sleep, wakes up. Let me just grab this Janet over here. And Janet wakes up looking like this, right? Who has had a client who has reached out like, help me, this is how I woke up looking? We do not want Janet to wake up looking like this, because when your guest just goes to sleep and doesn't do anything with their hair and they wake up like this, we talked about texture being fragile. If they're waking up like this, that means they're potentially going to be prone to damage. Yes, Latrice is laughing. Exactly. Because look, I've had some clients reach out to me like, why does my hair look like this? And it's like, we talked about this. You got to wrap your hair at night. So everybody put in the chat box, wrap your hair. Yes, Shirley, poor Janet. That's okay. We're going to help her out. So it's really important to wrap your hair before you go to sleep, no matter what texture type you have. Like if you have straight hair, wavy hair, coily hair, curly hair, if you are wearing a smoother style and you want to keep your ends as healthy as possible, and you've had issues with dryness, stress damage, you have to wrap your hair. So lucky for me, growing up in a salon, my dad has been doing hair 45 years. He still works with me behind the chair. I grew up learning how to wrap hair. Okay. My dad is African-American. I grew up in a salon that was predominantly an African-American salon. And that was one thing that him and his team always coached his guests on, was how to wrap their hair. So I'm just going to grab another brush here. All right. So we have our Samvia Artist Series brush. This is what I'm going to use for my wrap. And so what you want to do before you wrap the hair, so your guest is at home, they need to apply a little bit of product. If you have hair that's curly, coily, and is medium to high consistency, so it's that denim to that burlap, that wool feeling, we're going to go in with the coconut souffle, okay, from Mizani. So this is a hair dressing. I had mentioned it before. You can use it on wet hair or dry hair, but today we're going to actually use it for wrapping. So I'm just going to use the back of my nail just to get a pinch of it out. So you can see I don't have much, just like a dime to a pea size amount. Make sure you really emulsify. We emulsify so that the product is evenly distributed, and we're heating the product up in our hands. If we heat it up in our hands, it's going to penetrate the cuticle much more easily. All right, so Janet's at home. She's emulsified her product. That's something you explain to your guest as well. And we're applying it ends first, okay? Mid shaft to ends first. We get the ends around her hairline as well to make sure that we really address the hair that has a tendency to be drier, all right? So once we have addressed her ends, we're going to go in with our Artist Series brush, and we are going to start at the mid shaft to ends and detangle and evenly distribute the product. All right, so we're detangling, we're evenly distributing all of the hair. And now we're going to go through and wrap it. Now, the easiest way to teach somebody to wrap their hair is by using clips. I love the dry sectioning clips from Samvia because they're very smooth on both parts. Yes, we have some little teeth here, but because of this rubber, it stays pretty smooth when you lock it into the hair, okay? So we're going to go through and start to wrap. So I'm following the hairline as I'm wrapping Janet's hair. And you can see that as I'm brushing, I'm holding my hand flat. Once I have my hand flat locked in on a good portion of the head, and this is also going to be dependent on how much layers Janet has, how short her cut is. She's a little longer here, so I can go a little further. I'm taking the clip at the base and I'm just sliding it in to help lock and hold that hair. Okay. So I have it locked and held in, turning Janet around, going back in with my Artist Series brush, and continuing to wrap around the head shape. Okay. So continuing to wrap, and I'm just following the round of the head. Everybody put round of the head in the chat. So I'm following the round of the head because it's acting like a large roller. So this is going to keep a lot of body and volume in Janet's hair. All right. So I have all my hair here, using another dry sectioning clip and just sliding that in just to secure the hair for me. All right. So this is exactly what you want to show your client at home. I retail clips at the salon as well to make it easier for my guests to be able to accomplish this. And now I'm going through and just kind of gently brushing that hair forward and coming around again. All right, so now we're forward and we're up and around. So we can see this is swooping here. I'm just going to tuck this a little higher. Perfect. All right, so I'm literally going to be following the round of the head here. So literally adding this hair in, following the round of the head. I'm making sure not to really disrupt the hair that I've previously wrapped. All right, another clip here. The clips are going to give your clients control as they're wrapping their hair. So now I have this last little piece, and I'm just gently using my fingers to tuck it and wrap it around. You can definitely use a brush, but just know you have to be careful because, again, you don't want to disrupt that hair that you initially wrapped up. All right, let me grab my last clip here. Got just enough. Slide that in. All right, so this is essentially Janet's wrap. Okay, I promise you it's easier to do it on your own hair than it is to do it on a Janet mannequin. So once we have this nice and wrapped, I'm just going to re-secure these clips. Once we have this nice and wrapped, we're going to go through with a silk scarf. Everybody put silk scarf in the chat box. We're going to go through and secure this hair with a silk scarf because essentially these clips are not meant for her to sleep in. They're not meant for her to sleep in, and they're not meant to be tightly holding the hair. If we tightly hold the hair as she's sleeping, she's going to get an indent. We definitely don't want that. So these clips are literally just meant to be temporary placeholders so that when we go through, and Janet's fringe is a little wacky, so that's why we have that there. When we go through with our scarf, it's going to keep it in place. Oh, good. We have one more clip here. Perfect. So because of her fringe, she just needs a couple more clips. That's okay. All right. So now I'm going through with my silk scarf. Yes, this is actually the silk scarf that I sleep in. So just showing you that. So it's nice and big. It's just pretty much a square. Okay. We're going to fold it in half, right? Kind of like a bandana. So just folding it in half like this. And we're literally going to wrap this around Janet's head. Okay. So we're wrapping it around Janet's head. And I'm crisscrossing it in the back to then pull it up and forward so that we can tie it tight. Now, before I tie it tight, I'm actually going to gently open and remove that clip in the front and just tuck that hair in. Then I can go through and tie that tight so that it's secure. All right. So I have that tied nice and tight. Now we still have all those other clips in there, but that's okay because literally we're just going to gently open and release them. Gently open and release. Okay, because again, these clips are not meant to hold Janet's hair overnight. They're literally just going to be Janet's placeholder. And I think we have one more in there so that it's easy for her to wrap her hair. You can also use longer bobby pins, but my clients have found that the clips are a little easier because they're a little easier to grab out of the hair. All right. Ooh. Like I said, it's a little easier doing a person because I'm actually going to show you how I do mine as well. Okay, so essentially this is how Janet is going to be sleeping. I also recommend my clients also have a silk pillowcase because with the silk pillowcase, in case your wrap falls off, sometimes during the night, this will just come loose. Then your hair is still on a silk pillowcase. It's still kept nice and smooth and soft, okay? So we have that as far as Janet's wrap. When Janet wakes up in the morning, she's literally just going to untie that wrap, let her hair release, okay? She can even just shake it out a little bit and then go in again with my Artist Series brush and just brush it back down so that it's back in her style. Now, once she brushes it back down, back in her style, if she needs to, like let's say she brushed it back down, it's day 3 or 4 of her silk press, her ends feel a little dry, she can go back in again with some of the coconut souffle. Okay, so just putting just a teeny bit on the back of your nail to scoop it out. In the hands, emulsify, and then pull it through the ends. Okay, so boom. So easy as that. Then her silk press is nice and back into place. And she's ready to go to work for the day. It took her 2 seconds in the morning, so it's also saving her time. And she's not waking up like this and thinking, oh, heck, what am I supposed to do before work? Okay. All right, so that is that. Now, for your Janet who is curly. I'm actually going to show you how to do this on my hair because like I said, it's much easier to wrap your own hair than it is to wrap a mannequin. So same thing, using a little bit of the coconut souffle, back of my nail. I'm using a teeny bit more because my hair is a little more porous than Janet's is. Emulsifying it, pulling it through my mid-shaft to ends. All right, mid-shaft to ends. Mid-shaft to ends, I'll pull it through my fringe as well. Using my artist series, and I start at my ends, I lock in that hair so that I'm not causing any stress to my scalp, and I detangle. Okay, so lock it in, detangle, completely brushing out my curls. And you might be like, oh my gosh, why are you brushing out your curls? Trust and believe that they will be preserved with the way that I wrap it. All right, so everything is brushed out and detangled, right? So then I'm going to flip my head over, brush it all forward and down. So it's all forward and down. All right, so once it's all forward and down, I'm going to collect it in the front. And I'm essentially creating a ponytail at first, but a ponytail that is very close to the front of my hairline. All right. So you can see everything is coming forward, nice and smooth to that ponytail. All right. So once I have my ponytail, I'm going to twist and create essentially one big bun or bantu knot, and make sure I tuck my ends in to keep them soft and secure. So I have my little bun, okay? Then I'm gonna go through with a silk scrunchie or a satin scrunchie and just put it around once. I wanna make sure that this is loose enough that if I shake my head really hard, it can fall out on its own. If it's too tight, what's gonna happen is you're gonna get a line from your scrunchie, okay? So once I do that, going back through with my silk scarf, same thing that I did on Janet, just putting it over my bun, tucking it down and around. All right, I'm using this as a little mirror. Let's see here. Perfect. And tying it. Okay. If you've never wrapped your hair before, your partner might be like, what are you doing? What's going on? Trust and believe they'll get used to it. My husband is very used to seeing me this way. All right, so I have everything tucked and secure. And now I can go to sleep. I have my silk pillowcase, so in case this falls off, I'm good to go. In the morning, very quick, I literally just take this, pull it off, take out my scrunchie, shake it out. All right. And I'm back, okay? So super easy way to make sure that you are protecting your hair, protecting your scalp as you sleep. That silk scarf is just going to keep everything together, okay? And then you can easily just like use your fingers, go through it, kind of scrunch it, encourage that curl back, and you're good to go. So for your Janet, who is coming in like this, now you know how to show her to preserve her hair overnight. And literally, my hair is naturally curly, okay? I'm a curly girl. I silk press my hair once a week, and so I'm only shampooing once a week. I want to make sure that if I'm shampooing once a week, I'm not overdoing it with the heat, okay? So as long as I'm wrapping my hair at night, I can wake up and go. I don't have to go back through with the iron and potentially stress my hair out, okay? So we're just going to do a little quick recap as we close up of the products we use and the tools we used, as promised. So we started out with Janet. A reminder, she looked like this when she came in, okay? She's been wearing her hair natural. She's got a little bit of product buildup. So for Janet, to prep her, we went in with our Mizani Gentle Clarifying Shampoo. So this gently clarifies and removes buildup from the strand. Rinse that thoroughly. Then we went through with our press agent, shampoo, and conditioner, okay? So Mizani Press Agent Shampoo and Conditioner. This has agave extract and argan oil. It's really going to help to soften and smooth the cuticle right away at the shampoo process. So instead of forcing the cuticle closed, it's going to gently collapse it to make your silk press much easier. Then when we detangle Janet, right, because we want to make sure that her tangles are very easy to manage. We talked about the hair easily being stressed when it's wet. So we want to make sure we're detangling properly. We're going to go through with our 25 Miracle Milk. So a couple sprays in the hand, make sure you shake it up really good. Couple sprays in the hand, emulsify, apply it to the ends, work your way up. Then we took our Samvia 9 row and detangled. This brush is amazing for detangling. If you have curly hair, you need this brush. This is my go-to for if I'm wearing it smooth or if I'm wearing it curly, okay? So we went through starting at the ends first, detangled. Once we detangled Janet's hair, we put it in our bantu knots, All right, everybody type Bantu knot in the chat box. So we put it in our Bantu knots for control. The size and the density of the Bantu knots is dependent on the density and consistency of Janet's hair. All right. So we put that on first. Then as we drop down and work section by section, because we're only blow drying a section at a time, each section we applied the Mizani press agent, raincoat styling serum, and cream. All right. A little bit more of the cream and then a little bit of the serum. So for each section with Janet's consistency and density, we did a dime size of the cream and a half a dime of the serum. Okay. The cream is more moisturizing. The serum has more hold. Once we put the product in, we detangled it to make sure we evenly distributed the product. Again, using our continuous sprayer to keep the hair as saturated as possible before we begin the blow dry. Then we went through with our Pro-Ionic dryer and the Sea Smoke, like I said, my new fave color, and our Sambia paddle brush. So remembering that as we go through, we have to make sure that we're using that really skinny nozzle because it comes with two different nozzles. Use the really skinny one, and you are really make sure that you are directionally blow drying that hair. Nozzle pointing down and moving down in that zone 1 before we get to the zone 2 and zone 3 to smooth the cuticle out as much as possible. Once we have finished our blow dry, if we need to, remember we had a spot on Janet where her ends were still a little dry and tangly. We went through and we added a little bit of the ThermoSmooth Shine Extend. Okay, the Shine Extend is a heavier product. It's easy to overdo it. So make sure that if you're using it, you're just misting it where you need it and then going through to blow dry. If you have hair that's a little bit less coarse and a little bit more fine, you can go through and use a teeny bit of the coconut souffle, but again, a little goes a long way. It's concentrated. Okay. Once we went through and completely blow dried Janet, that's when we got into our sleeker iron in the Sea Smoke. Okay. And we went through and went section by section to really get that hair nice and smooth. Remembering that we took vertical sections, or I'm sorry, we took horizontal sections and we did our root bump twice first before going through mid shaft and releasing on the ends. We did the ends last. Okay. So that is product wise, all that we use for Janet. You can definitely go through with a little HRM once you're finished if you need something that's going to give you a little more hold. But I'm excited you all know how to tell your clients how to preserve their hair once you've given them these beautiful styles. So yes.
Yes. Thank you so much. And will you remind them what your affiliate code is? Because it's such an awesome opportunity for them to get an additional 10% off on the website.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So Ash, ASH, and then B as in boy, 10, Ash B 10. So that's my affiliate code. The thing I love about the Sambia affiliate codes is you can use that on top of the great sales, almost every sale that Sambia has, which I'm like, that blows my mind. So get those good deals, try out your silk press, and definitely educate your clients on how to preserve it. You will be golden if you can teach them how to preserve their hair between visits.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. We know that you're a super busy stylist and educator, so we always appreciate you bringing in great education to the Sambia channel. Thank you.
Thank you.